Dawn of War 4 will have a playable Primarch in the form of Lionel Johnson, and I'm not thrilled about it. I don't hate it, necessarily, as I do think they're handling it relatively well, in that they are making him a single-player exclusive unit, thank Jesus, which is why the phrase, "we didn't really care about balance," actually does make sense in this context. It's used for clickbait here, of course, but so long as he's a campaign-exclusive unit, then, well, you know, so be it. The big guy arrives at the end to save the day. But what I don't like about the idea of adding in Primarchs is that I view this as just one further step down the long and torturous decline of Warhammer 40,000 into the Hopepunk era. As you know, the return of Guilliman I was fairly okay with because it had been long foreshadowed, and the return of one Primarch wouldn't be that big of a deal. He would become one of the great High Lords of Terror, and he would lead particularly important military campaigns, but he couldn't possibly reinvent the entirety of the Imperium all by his lonesome. In fact, he could very easily become another aspect of the grim dark, the heroic character struggling against the mass inertia, the rot, and the bloated bureaucracy of the Imperium. But now that they're popping up willy-nilly, I mean, is the Lion going to be the last one? Unlikely, as the primary reason why GW are putting these forth now is because big, expensive-ass models, and because I genuinely do believe GW have long since lost sight of what Warhammer 40k actually is. But let's talk a little bit about the specifics here. So, they've announced that the Lion will arrive in Dawn of War 4, along with some data points here. During the Space Marine campaign, players will then take missions in command of both the Blood Ravens and the Dark Angels, and they can pick which mission they want to play. This is a strange choice, and feels somewhat forced to me, as why would you add in the Dark Angels into a story about the Blood Ravens? Now, one potential explanation might be who's working on it, as I'm pretty sure the writers behind this, there we go, John French, is known to have a massive boner for the Dark Angels. That's a potential explanation. Or the GW basically forced them into it, saying, okay, the Primaris are still shit, and everybody still, understandably, hates them, but we really do need to sell the new setting that the majority of the actual fans have considered long since non-canon, so can we put the Lion in here? Please, we're hoping this will be a big video game or something. That's my pet theory, indeed. The Dark Angels have their own playable commands for the Space Marine campaign, Company Master Estron and Chaplain Ezrael. So this too, they mention in the other interview that the factions will be playable in all gameplay modes, meaning that they will be multiplayer Dark Angels, but they will not be their own army, which is a little disappointing, honestly, because, okay, different heroes. That was an aspect that I liked of Dawn of War 3, one of the very few ones, where you could select hero loadouts, right? So you could bring these guys, that guys. That was a good idea, utterly undermined by the way the game played and the introduction of fucking knights, but a good idea. So more options there are absolutely a fine thing indeed, but I wish they would have gone the full way length with this and made the Dark Angel an actual, specific force within the game, giving them access to their own elites, the Deathwing, and more of a focus on hard-hitting, fast-moving units, for example. You could very easily make a distinct Space Marine faction within the game, separate from the more baseline Space Marines, but oh well. Plus, this is obviously going to be a massive amount of DLC for this. Oh god. I argue that Dawn of War should have done this as well, Dawn of War 2 that is. Going like, okay, listen, you've got Space Marines, you've got Imperial Guard, just start releasing basically skin packs, turning them into Ultramarines or Space Wolves or Death Squad of Krieg or Elysian Drop Troopers or whatever. I'd happily pay for that, and King Arts Games is at least listening to that piece of advice, which I also agree to them, mind you. The Dark Angels have their own unique identity and history as Space Marines. They have core strategy, tactics, wargaming, and weaponry, while still maintaining the distinct flavor and abilities of their chapter. I do love that we need to still point that out. While the Blood Ravens are often engaged in smaller conflicts that require tactical finesse and sometimes involve stealth, the Dark Angels deploy their full might to the battlefield, precision strike versus all-out war. So a bit of the balance there as well is that in one mission for the campaign, you just go balls-to-the-wall armor, and the other one you do sneaky stealth stuff, which again is a good idea, as I will then never pick the sneaky stealth stuff ever, but this is an ambitious project that they've got going on here, and I'm beginning to get a little bit worried about King's Art's ability to deliver on all of this, but okay. So, I want to talk a bit more about the generalistic idea of the return of the Primarchs and what I view as the Marvelification of Warhammer 40,000. So, one of the things that made 30k special is because that was kind of a cutaway period of time, or a time of legends, when these characters were around. You could see Sanguinius, you could see the Lion, Guilliman, the Khan, all of these people, and that was kind of like a wow. It felt like you were traveling back in time, in essence. By introducing them into the mainline universe, you lessen that. You reduce the impact of 30k. You reduce the legendary status of their names as heroes of ancient mythology, and worse still, you again, the Hopepunk thing, you completely undermine one of the key assumptions of the 41st millennium, that there is no hope. This is an era of endless warfare where humanity is desperately holding on by their fingernails to their own continued existence. Introducing not one, but two now superpowered, superhuman, both intellectual and physical mega creatures capable of turning the tide of entire campaigns practically by themselves really badly undermines that idea. There was always a bit of a balance concern here in the older version of 40k with the Demon Primarchs, as they were primarily explained, okay, well, why doesn't the Demon Primarchs just roll the Imperium? Well, because they're lazy, and because they're greedy little bastards who have more fun chilling around in their demon worlds than engaging in actual real strategic pursuits. To them, they exist in a place beyond time, and frankly don't give too much of a shit half the time. And when they do exit from the warp, they have weaknesses like the defeat of Angron Armageddon because they managed to destroy his connection to the world, thereby casting him back into the warp, as they needed to build all of those temples to allow Angron and his demon hordes to manifest fully on Armageddon in the first place, giving the Imperium time to send in reinforcements and so on and so on. But now we've got two of them. Now there are two of them. This is getting out of hand, unironically so. As with just Guilliman, okay, he couldn't fix everything by himself. Now you've got the Lion as well, possibly one of the strongest Primarchs in the universe, to the point that they even had to, I hear, nerf him. Now, I consider anything, including and beyond the fall of Cadia, to basically be bullshit at this point, filled with inconsistencies and utter nonsense, but apparently they've made him weaker because he's just grown old now. Hey, so Primarchs age now, do they? Well, I thought the entire point of the Space Marines were that they didn't really do that, but well, details. And hey, if you do need to put him in a game, perhaps by DW's instructions, then making him in just the campaign's the best way to do it. Drop him on the board, have him just wipe shit out, and have the player just go wee as he murders dozens upon dozens of Necron units in single swipes of his sword. Fair enough, but it really begins undermining the setting at large to that point, and it gives it that kind of like a almost cameo-esque appearance, like, oh god, the Lion! He just popped by and like, hello, waves to the camera, does some things, and then disappears forevermore. Very much so the Marvel effect, where a character will pop by, do a thing, and wander off screen again because, well, it isn't their movie. And as much as they do attempt to make it seem as if all of this is an interconnected universe, the reality is somewhat different, and that's what this feels like. It feels cameo-esque, it feels tokenistic, as if they were dragging him along to put him in there just to be like, ooh, Lion, and then shuffles him off the board again. Not to mention, I deeply dislike the entire idea of Primaries and the Dark Angels. Now, I again don't know if they've actually tried to justify this, but the Dark Angels would be one of the least accepted chapters of a bunch of outsiders that had been apparently created from their own confiscated gene seed at some point. Yeah, the Dark Angels don't really like outsiders, they don't trust outsiders, they don't trust the Imperium at large, and they sure as shit would not trust some random Mechanicus whoop squirrel to introduce hundreds if not thousands of new brothers into their ranks over the course of the next 100 years crusade. Such nonsense. Yet, of course, we're still going to keep on with the Primaries, I guarantee you. In fact, I'm pretty sure they made the Blood Ravens Primaries in this game. I think I've seen something like that, which is rather silly in my opinion, but oh god, oh well. I don't like the overall direction of it, but you know, there's even a wonderful parallel here. So it keeps bringing up the example of Star Wars, of what will inevitably happen over the long term when it comes to the degradation of Warhammer 40,000. The way that Star Wars began to treat Darth Vader is a wonderful way to illuminate this, where he was once an incredible personality on screen. He was the bad guy of his movies, of culture at the time. His impact was enormous, but now he kind of pops up here and there, and if you do it sparingly, that's fine. Like Darth Vader's little cameo in Rogue One, for example, was quite well done. He appears, he's an utter badass, and then kind of fades off into the background again. But they keep bringing him up now in vague little cameos or suggestions or mentions, almost as if they're like, well, you know, our actual setting doesn't really do well by itself. Could we just borrow a little bit of that prestige that you have there to pave over the weaknesses in our own setting, mayhaps? And that is a symptom of a setting, of a franchise, of a thing at large in decline. I don't like seeing it in 40k, even if, again, the decline is hardly difficult to spot at this point. So I'm not the hugest fan, but they could have been a hell of a lot worse. They could have introduced him as an actual hero character in multiplayer and simply repeated the flaws of Dawn of War 3, where you wouldn't ever choose any other hero characters because the entire game revolves around endgame uber-duper retardo powerful monsters that wipe the entire field clear, literally, in Dawn of War 3. So I'm not too against it, but it does bode ill for the rest of 40k. Until next time, I have been Arch. Thank you very much for watching. I do hope to see you all again soon. Then, a good day.